Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, where you learn about what's happening in the greater East Bay. I am your host, Jared Ash. Today, we are going to learn about community foundations and their role to help inspire all of us in our communities. We are joined by Dr. Kelly Bowers of the Three Valleys Community Foundation. If you live in another area, this is still relevant to challenges your neighborhoods face and your community should be engaged with. Welcome, Kelly. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited about being here.
Tell us first, what is the Three Valleys Community Foundation, and what is the difference between a community foundation and a regular foundation?
Three Valleys Community Foundation is a place-based, geographically defined philanthropy. Community foundations have a pretty long history. There's about 750 nationwide. Three Valleys is one of the newer ones in California, and we've been around since 2020. That's when our journey began. The big difference between a community foundation and other foundations and nonprofits, because we are a 501c3, the big difference is that we don't have one specific cause. Most nonprofits, they'll say that they are focusing on breast cancer, or they're focusing on homelessness, or some cause foster youth. In our case, a community foundation focuses on whatever needs surface from the community, but look very different in different communities. Now, there's some things that cross all communities. For instance, if we were located in Maui during those fires, emergency relief would have been our focus. When the Three Valleys Community Foundation, we pick up on the needs assessment and the data and statistics, and we listen to what is going on. We keep our pulse on any crisis or urgent issues and causes, and people bring those to us. And then we help address them. We bring in local resources to meet local needs, and we help harness the philanthropic power and generosity of corporations and donors and people who don't even realize what a difference they can make right in their own backyard.
That's great. And I know there's a couple of others in the greater East Bay. You have the Solano Community Foundation. You have the East Bay Community Foundation out of Oakland. Any others?
Well, there's a Silicon Valley Foundation, which is one of the largest in the nation. We partnered for a while with San Joaquin Community Foundation as well. They've helped us with some of our back office. It's a pretty tight network. Everybody helps each other because we know that we're not in competition. We're actually all complementary and help each other. Silicon Valley helps us with really complex gifts, such as Bitcoin or e-currency. East Bay Community Foundation transferred some of their funds to us because they were closer in proximity and they have a lot to focus on. Also, we all work closely together, but still divide and conquer different issues. It works out really well. There's always more need than any of us can address. It's good to have more people working in tandem.
Tell us about Dr. Kelly Bowers. What is your background and how did you arrive at the organization?
I have most of my background in public education, and I was first generation college, ended up getting my doctorate and going to UC Berkeley. I can't even believe it when you talk about even the Three Valleys. I have personally lived in Pleasanton, Dublin, San Ramon, Danville, and now the last 30 years in Livermore. I went to college in Berkeley, grew up in Alameda, was born in Oakland, worked in Union City. I feel like I represent the geography as well, and I'm very tied to the community. In my role in education, I was a teacher, middle school, high school, college, and then I also went into administration. Eventually, my last 12 years, after 35 plus years in education, I was the school superintendent for the Unified School District in Livermore. Throughout my career, I would pick up on causes. We took on Juul and anti-vaping in a large way. We took on some other large issues and challenges that youth and education, particularly mental health, and we won a lot of grants federally and did trailblazing work in mental health and youth. Often, these things would come to the forefront in my superintendent role with the local resources, build community partnerships, and tackle things together. And often in policy and advocacy and all these other things. And so it was a natural extension. I don't like to say I retired. I flunked retirement. I just shifted gears. I was superintendent with this one particular class. They started in kindergarten. And when they graduated, I graduated too. My next phase was taking on the community foundation, all of these causes, elevating nonprofit work, and then bringing it to a larger region. During my tenure as a superintendent, I would often notice the hidden poverty. I was part of the Anti-Poverty Coalition for the Tri-Valley. I was part of Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group. I would also do regional partnerships. And then during COVID, we really surfaced the high need from our Latinx population that's nested in Livermore, a lot of immigrant population. One of the mantras I often said was, yes, there's need throughout our county. Yes, there's really high need in the urban core. And a lot of that is addressed by East Bay Community Foundation. But often some of the needs in the Tri-Valley are submerged in the suburbs because they're not as apparent, but the accessibility and some of the resources aren't there. And during COVID, that really became glaringly apparent that in the midst of all the beautiful vineyards, wonderful industry, and the national labs, that there's also families really struggling just barely to get by. Part of my work is to raise awareness that it is wonderful to give to other causes and to help everyone, but also we do have need. There's a lot of affluence and there's a lot of really robust things happening, but there are people who still struggle. And to help people locally is really a wonderful way to see your dollars at work, and the impact is almost immediate.
When you talk about part of your job is to bring awareness to the community issues and bring them to the forefront for everybody to be aware of, that's great advocacy, great outreach, and just great awareness to what is going on.
It might manifest differently. It might look differently, but it's still there. Mental health issues are here. Health equity and access issues are everywhere. The really wonderful thing about our community foundation is our board of leaders are connected with a lot of different sectors and geographically as well. Even though our core is the Three Valleys, we have taken on a huge $3 million grant project with Alameda County solely, and that goes to all parts of Alameda County. We also have gone as far as San Jose. One of the things that community foundations do is we take in funds from donors, and they're called donor advised funds. They direct where the funds go. They get their tax write-off, but they also may have a passion for a certain cause. Or in some cases, they don't know what to do and aren't sure what nonprofit is vetted and where their money would be best spent. Sometimes they come in very focused and we use their funds, invest them, grow the corpus, and then we can start a scholarship or give to the causes they've identified. In other cases, I'm like a matchmaker. I say, oh, what do you care about? I can introduce you to these causes and these nonprofits, and then your money can go directly toward them. With the big corporations, the reasons why they like to give to a foundation is they could get nickel and dimed all day long by this cause, and they're all great, but it's a lot. If they give to us as part of our larger grant making, they're giving with a theme of environmental and sustainability, a theme of arts, or the theme of journalism and democracy. If they give it toward a theme, then we get it out to a lot of groups, so their reach is actually even broader. They don't have to give to this one and that one. By giving to us and we give to all of those, they can say, we just gave to 13 organizations in mental health that are doing incredible work throughout the entire region. It's a win for them because we're doing the fiscal management of the grant making.
Let's dive into some of those initiatives that you have. You've talked a lot about mental health, so let's start with that. What are some of those initiatives that you focus on within mental health, and how are you serving the community?
With mental health, each year we have something called the Community Impact Grant Making, and we chose the focus of mental health after doing research from the needs assessments that all the hospitals do together. Stanford Health, John Muir, Kaiser, Sutter, all joined together. And the big theme was that behavioral health, or mental health and wellness, really did cross every demographic, wealthy and in poverty, young and senior, especially after COVID and the pandemic. A lot of people were in isolation. It was something that was hitting everyone in a lot of different ways. There's a gamut of mental health, from anxiety and stress, social media problems, all the way to serious mental illness. And people are along those spectrums we felt we could make an impact on. There's also a lot of intersectionality. Some of the mental health issues manifest differently with people, homeless situations, or other special populations. We started Community Impact Health Grant Making, and many corporations gave and individual donors. And then our funding, we did a competitive grant process. We had 39 applicants, 38 were qualified. And then we had a team of experts in the field who became part of our evaluation committee. And we were able to give out $140,000 or so toward different nonprofits that are working. Teen Esteem Plus, Pleasanton Partners in Education, Sunflower Hill. There's a group with different needs and areas. Love Never Fails, Harmony and Healing. They received funding, and then they do the direct service. We're not providing the direct service. We're supporting them in their work. We made it a streamlined process. We don't put them through a lot of bureaucracy. We want them to spend their energy and time on doing the work and sharing the impact. If you have to spend more time telling us what you're doing than doing it, you're not going to make the same impact. This year, we're expanding that. We're still taking in sponsors for this year's grant making, and we're expanding it to be health equity and access as well as environmental health, because we have donors who care about that. And some of the corporations, that's a little more aligned to their mission, so they're able to give more.
I just had Assemblywoman Bauer Cahan, who represents the Three Valleys area, and we were talking about mental health, and she was just talking about how important it is before teens particularly reach crisis situation. She elaborated on suicide rates in teens and college kids, especially coming out of COVID. You got to get there beforehand. And you mentioned a lot of school-related groups, teen-related groups, and getting in with the goal of getting in, right? Before hopefully people have too big of a crisis. And I think it's just so important to engage people in the conversation.
There's a lot of work being done in preventative work, education, and understanding, and also some of it's cultural sensitivity too. One of our groups, Alan Hu Foundation, works particularly with families that might be reluctant to talk about this situation. And then also Z Cares, both foundations were started out of a suicide of a young male student in Pleasanton. Their parents, in honor of their lost children, wanted to prevent that from happening to someone else. It came from a very real situation. That's one thing I always remind people. We do look at the statistics, we look at the data, but behind every data and statistics is a data point is a human. It's someone's child or family member, loved one. It isn't just about the numbers. It's about the impact that you can make to really transform and help lives. And what we saw in these crisis moments was it's the individual as well as everyone in their family and the community that's affected by crises. So, and that carries over into the newer project that we're doing with Alameda County. We were selected to handle the grant-making process for the opioid settlement crisis in Alameda County. And so we'll be overseeing $3 million in grant-making to help with opioid mitigation, harm reduction, prevention, and treatment, and whatever comes up. And there's a couple of really exciting things about it. But one is that the focus, we will be looking for priority consideration for the specialized populations that tend to be most impacted, which are incarcerated or recently incarcerated men, much higher group, vulnerable youth, as well as African Americans and African American men, and people who are either recently unhoused or unsheltered. They're even higher at risk for the opioid crisis challenges, overdose and poisoning. There's also a large group of people now at risk because of fentanyl. These are people who might not be addicted. They might be using recreationally, and it's now laced with fentanyl, which the statistics on that are staggering. It's 50 times more potent than heroin, and it's really scary. There needs to be education, and Narcan training needs to be something that is not taboo. People need to have it. One of the things we did in the Livermore School District when I was superintendent is we started doing teen mental health first aid for all sophomores, in the same way that it's pretty commonplace for people to say, oh, I'm going to learn CPR and I'm going to have first aid. I'm going to know these things so that if someone's in crisis, I can attend to until we can get 911 and help. And that saves lives. Teen mental health first aid training is the same concept. It's the warning signs, and then you get someone help before something really badly happens. And I know we saved lives through that process. So it's really about taking away the stigma and letting everyone talk about it instead of hiding and pretending everything's okay. I always tell people, if you look at your social media, that's the highlight reel. That's not the real. You put your perfect dinner, you don't put when you burn the toast. It's the same thing as when people have challenges. If you saw that I had a broken arm, you would open the door for me and help me. You would carry my groceries maybe, but you can't see always a mental health challenge. So people present as if things are fine. And if they present that way and they actually need help, people don't go out of the way to help them because they don't know, or people don't know how to ask for a variety of reasons. We're just trying to make sure people understand it's not weakness. It's okay not to be okay. What's not okay is to keep it to yourself and not to get help. And so the nonprofits that are positioned to give this help, we want them to spend their time helping, not fundraising. So our job is to garner these resources and get it right to them so they can make it happen.
What's the experience about working across new territories? You're now providing grant funds throughout all of Alameda. What is that experience like?
The good thing is we use the networks of the people who are set up that way. And so Alameda County Behavioral Health is our partner. We use that resource. But in addition, we had a lot of partnerships already. So the NAACP, Freddie Davis and her group, we already knew them and they will help get the word out in that area. La Familia was a partner in Livermore and Hayward. And so we have a lot of connections with the nonprofits who are doing the work. And then we call on everybody, all the resources and networks. One of the reasons why I'm doing the podcast is to start getting that word out. And we use social media. We have a newsletter. We have a lot of different listservs that we're part of. Every city in the area will be able to use their newsletters, and the things that go out will be pushing it out, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, however, Twitter, whatever they use, we would get it out in different languages. Because when you get to different parts of the county, there's different populations. Also, we want to make sure that everybody has access.
That smart tap into networks and infrastructure and communications tools that are already in existence versus trying to rebuild. You talked a little bit about data. Does your organization use data in judging your grants or in results? If so, how?
Data certainly informs which causes we select. Once we have the competitive process, we don't superimpose our expectations on people. We have them set their measurable outcomes and hold them to that with the understanding that if things change, they can adjust to be flexible. Sometimes the best laid plans don't always work out, and we don't want them to be inflexible because things do have to shift. They build into their grant proposals how they're going to measure the outcomes, whether it's in the number of people served or the different types of people served or the different access. They create their measurements, and then we have a 6-month check-in and the final year-end report. We allow flexibility and variety in how that's presented because sometimes it's a written report, but it's always also a verbal check-in. We've also had site visits, and we have video testimonials and things. So people can really present how their impact has been shown. We also want them to tell us what challenges and how we could have done things differently, and so that we are also always evolving and improving our process as well. And we found that our grant recipients appreciate that. They appreciate the fact that we give them that time and just listen and to help them make adjustments. If they have a leadership change, it doesn't mean that everything's going to stop, but it might mean they had to shift gears a little bit. We gave a grant to the group working with the Federal Correctional Institute with the women who had been traumatized and abused in the system, and they closed this facility. So we're concerned. You've given us money. We still haven't used it all, but now they're not here. They were concerned about the geographic placement, but the nexus of the issue began here. Now they're farmed out. And the problem is even harder because they're in a different way traumatized by being distant and separated. They had to shift. They contacted us and said, we're going to shift to more virtual support for them and maybe some visiting, but we're not going to spend the dollars that were granted to them on traveling to all the different places with the victims. That makes sense, right? We want things to make sense for what's real. We still want the service to happen, but if they have to change the modality, then we can understand that because that's only right. They shouldn't just stop helping.
I understand why they had to close that facility because you were looking at large scale problems in Dublin. But you're right, moving all those people doesn't deal with the problems. It just gets them away from it. But they still have the trauma and the mental health issues that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. The other good thing that came from data was that we realized there were other challenges being faced by other groups. We use a lot of qualitative data, and part of that comes from listening to the community. We participate in a lot of focus groups. People will bring causes to us, and we're able to respond. That's exciting because we're creating something that has not been there before. For instance, we had a very successful person who worked at DoorDash and happened to be an alum of a school in our area and said, I want to start a scholarship, and I can't seem to give the money away. No one really knows how to start one. They just know how to give toward existing. I said, oh, well, we can do that. And so we did start one, and the first $10,000 scholarship was given out this year to a very deserving young person. That'll be a perpetual endowment, and then it'll grow. As soon as we did that, another high school said, how'd you do that? Maybe we should. It's going to grow this impact. I think that's what happens. Sometimes it's a baby step the first time we try it. And then when you have success, people will see that and it'll grow. We also did a very small fund, but it was so meaningful. When I first came on board with the foundation, there was a Dublin police officer, a deputy, who lost her life in the line of duty. It was a medical emergency. It was Aubrey Phillips, and her husband, her surviving husband, widower, is Josh, and he's also a deputy, and they have 3 kids. There were a lot of people that said, we want to give him money. Is there a GoFundMe? They're just showing up at the police station with money, and they can't take that, but we could. So we started a fund and took in the money. We were able to give it toward the nonprofit cause. I think a lot of it went for childcare before they were able to make their shifts adjust, and one could watch, and suddenly he's on his own doing that. There were a lot of people that just wanted to do something at that moment then, and they didn't know we gave them that channel and that vehicle, and that was really special. When the floods hit last winter, Sunol was hit really hard, the community. So we started up, that's our territory. We started up the emergency relief fund, and the funds ended up going toward the school because the Sunol K-8 Sunol Glen School, their garden was destroyed. So I actually wrote a grant for that, and we received $25,000, and then plus other donations went in. You're able to see that impact. You can see the before and after pictures, and you can say it went from destroyed and really sad for the kids to this beautiful project. Those are the kinds of things that surface in Pleasanton. Also, one of the high schools couldn't hold certain events because they weren't ADA compliant, and the bond hadn't addressed it, or a group really gung-ho parents and community members said, let's make it happen. We were able to stand up a fund, bring in $250,000, and then give that out with very restricted guidelines, and then it happened. Those are the kinds of things, how many young people are now able to go and use the facilities and all those things. When I was in Livermore, I always had connections in the Tri-Valley area, and by extension, working with the county and even Contra Costa County, we have done projects throughout. We partner with the Danville Area Chamber of Commerce, and they did their own version of youth mental health. Money went to the Discovery Center and some of the areas there. We also do something called Impact Diablo Valley. So 100 families each give $1,000. Often in philanthropy, you get people who give smaller amounts and people who give larger amounts, and sometimes there's a preference for the higher amounts. But if you look at it from a ratio balance, if a family has little means and they give $500, sometimes that's more meaningful than a bazillionaire or whatever giving $100,000. It sounds like a lot, but comparatively, it's not as much of a sacrifice. What happens with this concept is that kind of level the playing field. They say no matter how much you make, everyone's going to give a set amount. Their goal was 100 families at $1,000 each. Even if you could give more, I think they might take if each of the couple wants to give it, but that's it. From that money, then everyone who gave gets a voice in where the money goes. And so nonprofits apply, we publicize it, do their fiscal sponsorship. And then from that group, they give one $100,000 grant. Both years we've done it, we've actually brought in $150,000. We went over 150 families. We also gave 2 $25,000 ones. And $100,000 is nothing to seize it. That can make a huge impact for a smaller nonprofit in Contra Costa County. Those are all focused in Contra Costa County because that's where Impact Diablo Valley is. And there's amazing groups there. It's like Dennis on Wheels, We Care Children. They received significant funding. But also, putting my education and youth hat on, they have something called Philanthropy at the dinner table, raising our next generation of philanthropists. A lot of people think of, where do you learn that when you have money, that some of it could be set aside for others instead of just charity begins at home? What they do is they talk about it with their kids, and then their children also pool funds. I don't know if they have a lemonade stand or their allowance, whatever. And then they also listen to presentations and give to causes they care about. That's really beautiful because, again, it's not about the amount as much as this concept that you begin to learn that if you have fruits of labor that you could share with someone and maybe he doesn't. It's really teaching empathy and compassion and responsibility instead of being selfish and just thinking about, I could just buy another Game Boy or something. I still have Game Boy even around.
They all have tablets, and
Yeah.
I love that. There was one organization I was talking to about a year ago, and they're like, "It's $10,000." I was like, "That's outside of my budget. Don't you want somebody who can give $500, like you talked about, $1,000 for that one cause, and get me involved for the next 10 years?" Instead of turning me away, now I'm turned off by your cause and what you're doing, instead of trying to get 10 of my other peers to come in with me.
I'm really glad you brought that point up because that's been a sticking point for me in being new to the not-for-profit world. I've worked in school districts, but in this purely philanthropic arena, there's a lot of focus on, obviously, the big donors who have a lot to give. But when I go back to the roots of the community foundation, I think it's the opposite. I shared this when I interviewed for the position, and it must have resonated because I got the job. What I said is, in my perfect world of community foundation, if we have 100,000 people in a community, wouldn't it be more beautiful if we had 100% giving, even if it was 5 cents, or whatever, because then that's a true community taking care of community. And it could still be that some gave more, but we could just have one person bankroll everything, but it doesn't build the sense of community and belonging. I actually lean a little bit toward what you're saying, which is everybody giving. We always say time, treasure, or talent. Not everybody has expendable funds. Maybe you give your time. Maybe you give your attention. Maybe you have a skill. And that's equally valuable. I used to tell people about volunteers and they'd say, "I don't pay anything." I said, because they're priceless. People giving of their time. There's even a lot of companies now that will say, we will give money and we'll also give volunteer time. We partner with a really neat group called National Charity League. These are moms with daughters. They come to our events and they help together with, we don't have a lot of events, but when they come, they help register. They're the ushers, or they set things up in the name tags. And they're also bonding and learning together too. I put their logo just as large as the big corporation that gave 50,000, because you got to recognize what they gave. They gave their heart and their time.
That's a great message that I hope should be shared out there. And now you got me thinking so much.
What? That's my job.
It's giving back. And I want to hit on the point that you talked about, right? With 3 young daughters, lemonade stand, 50%, you can make the money, but 50% has to go to a cause. Fire victims, because there's almost every summer a fire. I love knock on wood, there hasn't been a big one this year. My wife organizes a costume drive to help, and we engage all 3 kids to help kids at shelters with Halloween costumes. There's actually a lot of programs for prom dresses and figuring out what everybody wants. And they all move shelters regularly, making sure we coordinate all that logistics is really helpful. And we keep thinking of ways how to expand it because it's our family thing, but we need people to donate. We think we can cover more geography with other ways, but the point of this isn't about what we're doing. It's that we're engaging our kids in it. When costumes come in, they have to sort that. They have to run the lists. They have to be partaking in filling the car with them to bring them to the shelters. It's really just teaching them, stop complaining about your costume, look at what all these other kids need and why do they need it, right?
It gives them a new perspective. If you are looking for donations, my husband will love you, because being in schools, we have costumes galore. I taught drama, and sometimes you don't wear them that often. And so they are in storages and things like that. And so we have some to get.
Right.
Well, that's good. I love that concept of your own daughters learning that. I think a lot about where I learned it. There's something called the Jerry Lewis telethon. And if you ever heard of it, every Labor Day, we were on the phone, and my parents, other families were camping or whatever they did right before Labor Day. I was always doing that. We just thought that's what people did. I think those were my first exposure to that. And then certainly as I was growing, there were times in our life that people helped our family when different struggles happened. I was a recipient of a Rotary scholarship, the speech contest and all that. And now I'm a Rotarian giving money to the scholarship. So it comes full circle that way as well. It is really inspiring to hear from people about how did they first decide to give and when. And sometimes, frankly, sometimes people say, I just did it for the tax write-off, but then they stayed for the cause because they got hooked. So they might have just done it because someone said, oh, you need to give your money. And then when they really started to attend to what was happening and to see the impact, then they end up really feeling good about itself. And there's a lot of things that are contagious, COVID and negativity, but so is generosity and kindness. And when people do that, you actually feel better and it grows. It is a very positive effect. And again, those are the intangibles. And there's the concrete things. We know how many people are being served and which demographics we're touching. But then the intangibles are just the way that people begin to feel that they belong and that they're seen and that there's hope. And for every person you help, they become someone who helps someone else when they can.
The pay it forward concept. I also want to hit on something else you talked about which was the benefits of a community foundation. A lot of those one-time projects, the garden and playground getting destroyed, the scholarship, which led into long-term, are all things that the foundation could do. People don't have to stand up $100,000, $200,000 for an ADA project and write grants. There's ways to partner to help achieve those broader goals.
Right. Sometimes people want to be more involved or not. In the case of a scholarship, they might want to be involved in the committee. They can't be more than 50% of the committee, but they might want to be there. And others say, here's funding. We just want to be there to hand out the check. And some do it anonymously. They're not doing it for any reason other than they just feel like they should. And they don't really, we are happy to take that on. We did another really neat project. It was a group of mostly alumni from Amador High School. They wanted to capture the stories of the past. They had many generations, mostly in the 1950s and 60s, when they were in high school. They captured the stories because they knew they wouldn't be around forever. They captured an oral history, turned it into a book. And then, since they're all doing fine in their lives, they were like, what do we do with the money? They came to me and I said, we can help promote the book and the proceeds should go to something. But they weren't sure what. I said, journalism is, at a crossroads right now. And Amador Valley has, since that's where you guys are from, Amador Valley has an award-winning, nationally acclaimed journalism program that now does podcasts and all those different things. I said, they can't do their paper anymore because after COVID, the advertising died out and they don't have a printed paper. And these are young people. They're the storytellers of the future. What they did is any proceeds from the sales, and I went with them, we went to different places, the library and the Civic Center and the other homes and residentials where people live. We ended up with $10,000 that we gave to the Amador Valley journalism program. About a month later, we heard that there was a movie, a documentary, and it was called Stripped for Parts, American Journalism at the Brink. It was about the demise of local journalism over time. And because of social media changes, because of some of the big hedge fund takeovers and the reality is it's not as thriving. The Pleasanton Weekly contacted us because they are now a nonprofit. They're called the Embarcadero Media Fund. And so they said, we'd like to get some awareness about our nonprofit. And I said, this is perfect because we have the young ones, the future storytellers. Steve Glazer, the senator seat, just had a bill about it. We just opened one of our newest funds, Partners for the Local Press. As I began to research it or at Stanford about it, it's something that community foundations are picking up all over the nation because it's keeping the community voice alive. It's also an equity lens because the voices of our community are the different demographics that maybe don't have voice. And if it's all taken over by free messaging and things that are universal or not with the pulse of the community, then you're not even going to hear about the local things. We had this panel at the Firehouse Arts Center, and we had about 215 people registered. They saw the documentary. It was free. And we asked if people wanted to donate. Now that fund has begun. We're starting small, $2,500, I think, and then it'll grow. When I look at these other larger foundations who are more established, sometimes they'll sponsor a local sports reporter so that someone can cover the kids' sports, or they'll do things like that. Otherwise, the big reporters, the big wig people, they come in only when there's a huge catastrophe usually, right? When I grew up, I don't know if you ever saw the Oakland Tribune building, but that was there. And then suddenly it's just not there. If you had asked me 2 years ago, were we going to be doing that? I would say, I don't even know. I don't know. Once it surfaced, we embraced it and said, yes, we can help with this.
You got a lot of stuff going on. Before we take off, any other initiatives or projects you want to share?
Our next project, I don't know if it's we'll be doing a webinar on October 30th. I'm not sure when this will air, but and so we also, part of what we're doing is trying to help educate people about finances and giving and giving. And a lot of people give impulsively, and that's fine, you hurt. But planned giving can actually be very smart investment as well. And it can help you in a lot of different ways. We have a group called the Professional Advisors Network. These are affiliates, volunteer their time to help us understand trends, laws, tax things, and changes, and how that affects people who give and the best ways to give. This group is hosting a webinar, and this year it'll be the end of year planned giving checklist. So it's going to be on October 30th. It's just an hour, and we're going to videotape it so people could watch it later to take an inventory of things. And then there's lots of different ways people can liquidate stocks. People can start a family foundation, transfer their family foundation, and we can run it for them so they don't have to do all the administrative burden. I think the donor advised fund is something a lot of people don't realize. You give it one, get that tax write-off, and then you parse it out as you would like over time, with more thoughtful and have vetted reasons. Or you could pre-plan how they go out and grow the money. Community foundations have the ability through law to invest it and grow. The stock market has been doing really well lately. We've seen people amplify it. Some of them are endowed and some of them aren't, and they're just giving a percentage of whatever's there. We're seeing that grow in leaps and bounds, and it's very exciting. This will be a way for people to learn. Our advisors, they're CPAs, tax attorneys, and financial wealth advisors, and doing this webinar. Part of our goal is to teach people not only about what the need is, but what you can do about it, and then help them have tools. We're not going to take the place of their CPA or their advisor or their trusted attorney, but we are going to at least give them some best practices and help people get on their way. I think if I could leave anyone with anything, is that it doesn't really matter where you are in your journey with philanthropy. It could be something new. It could be something you've always done. It's really important to attend to the fact that you can make a difference. If we don't take it in our hands, who will? Who's going to care more about our own community locally than us? We can still give to our alma mater here. We can still give to causes in other nations, and the money will go a long way. But we also can't ignore the fact that we have a lot of nonprofits doing incredible work, and there are gaps between what the government can provide and what is here, and so we can fill that. I just invite everyone to be part of our community and be part of our community foundation and be part of the solution.
Thank you for sharing.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly Bowers of the Three Valleys Community Foundation, for joining me today.
Of course. And please go to our website, www.3vcf.org, because everything that I said will be there in a way that you can digest the print process and help make things happen.
Wait, don't leave yet. Hit subscribe. Make sure you get the weekly updates. We have a new episode every Wednesday for stuff happening in the East Bay. In the meantime, follow me on LinkedIn, Jared Ash, or check out our firm where we have a weekly newsletter and blog at Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today on the Capstone Conversation.
Thanks.